what it's like to study modern languages at university. So in some ways it's the same, yeah? In some ways it's the same subject, it's a continuation of the kind of language learning you're doing at school. So you will be still learning speaking, listening, reading, writing in your target language. You'll still be learning grammar, you'll still be learning vocab, you'll still be having classroom situations like this where you're improving your language. The difference being you're doing it at a much higher level, you're doing it at a much more rapid pace because you're not having to fit it in with lots of other subjects. And also, as you'll find, perhaps you're already finding when you start to learn language, there's a sort of snowball effect, that the more you learn, the faster you learn it, the quicker you can get to grips with new concepts, and the more confident and fluent you're becoming. But there's more. So at the moment, language learning for you is basically trying to gain fluency in producing the language and comprehension and understanding the language. There's a whole realm of culture which forms a very important part of university degrees in modern foreign languages. So for example, if you're doing a degree in Spanish, you are learning fluency in Spanish language, but you're also learning about the cultures of the countries in which Spanish is spoken. So European Spanish culture and South American Spanish culture as well. And similarly for whatever other language you're studying, you'll be learning about the literature of that nation or nations. You'll be learning perhaps about the film, you'll be watching movies, and using that both to enhance your language, but also to enhance your cultural knowledge so you know more about French or Spanish culture, and also for its own sake. In the same way that we study English literature in order to study how literature works, to study how people are represented, to study the kind of political themes and everything else that's going on inside literary texts. We're doing the same thing in modern languages degrees. There is more to a nation and a language group than literature and film, of course. You will also be looking at the politics and the society of the country or countries in which your languages are spoken. This will vary from course to course. You can go and do a modern language degree which is all about the books and films, if that's the kind of stuff that interests you. You can go to a different institution and you can do a language degree which is very much more involved in the current affairs and the news and the stuff that's going on in the politics and the society of the country right now. So there are different sort of flavours of modern languages courses to suit every taste. And then you can also, if you're interested, choose a course which involves the study of language itself, how language works. The discipline is called Linguistics. It's not the most exciting looking image I've got for it, but it can actually be really fascinating. You can do it as part of a modern language degree, you can do it in many institutions like here, you can do a joint degree where you study a language, like German, but the other half of your degree is about studying language and just exploring how language works. And it involves things like psycholinguistics, where you discover how language is produced and interpreted in different parts of the brain. You can do sociolinguistics, where you talk about the way that, say, the French spoken in the poor suburbs around Paris differs from the French spoken by elderly professors in French universities, and the way that these different kinds of French connect or fail to connect with each other. So linguistics can be a very interesting subject, and one that, while you might not be very familiar with it at the moment, it might be one to consider if you're thinking of getting further into language study. And then, as well as all this, if you do study languages at university, you get something which is very special to modern language degrees, which is that they have a year abroad. This is a genuine year abroad with genuine students. I don't know why they're doing that, but they are genuine year abroad students. So most modern language courses these days are 4 years long, with a third year normally that you'll spend immersed in a target language environment, perhaps on an exchange to a German university, perhaps working in a Portuguese school, perhaps in an internship in an Italian law firm, but somewhere in a real target language environment where you're speaking and hearing it every day, you're making friends, you're having fun, and while you're doing that, you're almost without noticing it, becoming day by day more confident, more fluent, more at home in the language that you're studying. So that's more or less how a university course in modern languages works. Some of the details about choosing courses is not particularly relevant to you at this point. I don't think there will be time to worry about some of the nitty-gritty of it later on. A few things that you might want to consider at the moment are the Gcse choices you're going to have to make. To study modern languages at university, obviously you're going to have to have languages. You're going to have to be able to demonstrate an aptitude for languages from an early stage of your schooling. So you're going to have a GCSE in a modern foreign language or other. Very often, all that universities are looking for is evidence that you are keen on and good at modern languages. So you don't necessarily have to study at school the language or languages you want to study at university. That you can very easily study, say, French and German at school because that's what your school is going to offer you, and then you can head off into studying Chinese and Japanese when you get to university. There's a lot of possibilities for doing that. And then the range of content, teaching and assessment styles, there is a lot of stuff out there. Again, I think I should probably leave that for later on when you actually have to start looking through university courses and university guides. But just to say for now, there is a huge amount of variety both in the languages being offered and also in the approaches to teaching, the focus on the literary side, the focus on the political side. And what you need to do is be a discerning shopper and decide what exactly it is that you're interested in. And then somewhere there will be a course to fit you. You can study a single language, 2 or 3 languages together in various university courses. You can continue to study stuff you've been doing at school, or you can start again from scratch. A lot of schools tend to focus still on European languages, but if you're interested in moving away and discussing or learning about Middle Eastern or Far Eastern languages, there is a lot of courses on offer to study those in UK universities, including this one. Plus, of course, you don't have to throw yourself wholeheartedly into being a modern linguistic university. You can combine it. So you can do a joint degree, which could be 50-50, where you're doing half German, half history, or it could be something with a different ratio. So you could be doing like engineering, a full engineering degree with German, where you have a small amount of German in there, which then gives you an extra boost to your CV, that not only can you become an engineer, but you can become an engineer who can speak to German people. Plus, of course, linguistics, that you can also study language itself as a topic. There are subjects such as European studies and cultural studies, which have a kind of linguistic flavour. Some of these courses you can actually study the culture of a language without necessarily being able to speak the language. So, for example, you can look at German literature in translation through a European studies or a cultural studies course. Or, as I mentioned, you can take a course in an entirely different subject. And in most universities these days, unfortunately not this one where you have to kind of either do 100% or 50%, but most universities have a modular structure where you can take a little bit of a language alongside another major subject. When it comes to looking at for which course to go for, the title does not say it all, so you need to be a little bit, to delve a little bit further into it to find out exactly what you get out of it, what level of fluency would you get out of it. If you're going for a course which says engineering with German, are you actually going to come out of it going to be able to communicate German, or are you going to come out of it with just a sort of basic phrasebook German? The depth and breadth of cultural coverage, how much are you going to learn about the people and the places where these languages are spoken, how much do you want to know that kind of stuff, and language for specific purposes. Do you want to be able to do simultaneous translation? Do you want to be able to interpret? Do you want to be able to just use your language for a few kind of minor details around the sides of your main job? Or do you want this to be the main thing that you're capable of doing? So lastly, where can you go once you've got yourself a modern languages degree? So one of my students is on here recently. This is Birkin in London. I have a student of French and German who went off to be an international lawyer at a law firm based somewhere in that building, so where she has where she has the right to use the restaurant with a panoramic view on the top floor, which is only for people who work in that building. And she's not yet invited me to join her. If you're going to go and work in international business, international finance, you could go and do it in London. You could, of course, actually head out into another country, such as Germany. This is the Deutsche Bank headquarters in Frankfurt. where another ex-student of ours is currently working. Perhaps unsurprisingly, graduates from modern languages degrees have the highest percentage of graduates from UK universities of getting their first job in a foreign country. So if you do want to head out and see the world and experience something a bit different from your back garden, then a modern languages degree is a great way to open doors to find jobs elsewhere and to be able to travel and settle in other places. The law is very, very popular for our undergraduates, including the one that's working in the Gherkin at the moment. The thing about law is you can pick it up in a year. It's very common for people who want to go into the law to do a degree in something else for 3 years, and then all you need actually is a 1-year law conversion course, a master's course, and you're then allowed to become a junior lawyer and start practicing law. So many people who go, I mean, you can do an undergraduate degree in law, of course, as well, but many people who go into it do it by having done a degree in something else first, often modern languages, and then a law conversion course. And then if you have a modern languages degree plus a law master's, you can then become an international lawyer, because you can do it through different languages. And the point I want to make is, you can't do it the other way around. The thing about modern languages is, it takes time for language skills to percolate their way into your brain. You know this already. You can't pick up a language in 3 weeks' time, no matter how many people on the internet try to tell you you can. You need to spend the time to practice and keep going, and gradually let it sort of merge into you until you become a competent, fluent speaker of a language. And that's why you can very often do a modern languages degree and then pick up a new skill in the master's, but you can't really do the other way around. You can't pick up a language in just a 1-year course. This is an ancient advert, I'm not quite sure I've given you that image, of an ambassador's reception where they're serving Ferrero Rocher to represent the diplomatic service. That many of our students head into the civil service, into the foreign office, into the diplomatic corps. You may not immediately start having ambassadorial receptions in exotic locations, but the foreign service, the diplomatic corps, are people who really need linguists. Somewhere where they're very much in demand. You cannot necessarily become J.K. Rowling if you do a degree in modern languages. J.K. Rowling did a degree in French and classics, and once you know that, you see it all the way through the Harry Potter books. So it's just suffused with names in Latin, like names in French, like Malfoy, spell names with a bit of Latin in them. There's a lot of kind of linguistic inventiveness coming out of there. But the point I wanted to make is that it's a degree in being able to use language, being able to use languages. It's also a degree in exploring a culture, in looking at the texts and the films of the culture, and seeing what's good about them, seeing how they work. And there's no better way to train yourself up to be a creative person than to study other people's creativity. So a lot of writers and poets and filmmakers and people in TV, they've come through arts degrees in modern languages or in English as an expert background in the sort of skills you need to then produce your own creativity. You can become a journalist. Again, you can become a journalist with an English degree, become a journalist from a modern languages degree, and you can go abroad and you can speak to people in foreign languages, and you can actually discover the news that's coming from non-English speaking places. So again, a modern languages degree, as well as training you up in your own use of language, it gives you a passport to head out into the world and opens a lot more opportunities than being monolingual would. And lastly, I've given you all these ways in which you can go out and be fulfilled creativity and make yourself millions, which I think is a great thing to do. If by any chance you have other ambitions, you can also use a modern languages degree to change the world. Once you can speak other languages, once you can understand and interact with other cultures, you have the skills that you can need to get out there and start changing things for the better. So I have a student who founded her own charity actually shortly after leaving her undergraduate degree, which is doing extremely well. And if you did want to be able to get out there, get into international development, get into non-governmental organisations, then being able to speak foreign languages, one or more, is one of the essential skills that you need to get out there. So I hope that gives a few helpful ideas and perhaps a few suggestions that you haven't thought of before about just what you can do with a modern languages degree. So I might now invite